Good morning, everyone. All right, so I'm going to read that next chapter right now of what was the Battle of Gettysburg. Oh, it's Tuesday. Ain't it great? Chapter 3, Day 1, July 1st, 1863. Around 7:30 the next morning, two brigades of Confederate soldiers were marching towards Gettysburg. Their leader was General Henry Heath. The day before, Heath's scouts had reported seeing Union cavalry near Gettysburg. He figured it was a small group of local soldiers. His men could handle them easily. He should have sent out patrols to find out exactly how many Northern soldiers were nearby, but he didn't. This was a big mistake. Union soldiers along the ridge saw a cloud of dust coming toward them. It was the rebel forces. When the enemy troops drew closer, a young Union officer named Marcellus Jones borrowed a type of gun called a carbine from one of his men. He laid it across the top rail of a fence, took careful aim, and fired. It was the first shot in the bloody Battle of Gettysburg. There's that General Heath, and then there's another picture. Infantry soldiers on foot on both sides carry guns called muskets. A soldier had to stand to reload his 5-foot-long musket. This took time and exposed him to enemy fire. The Union cavalry, however, was outfitted with a new kind of rifle called a Sharp's carbine. These rifles were small, only 39 inches long. Soldiers could easily reload them while they were sitting or lying down. They simply slid a cartridge into a slot on the side of the carbine. This let Union soldiers fire about 6 rounds a minute, which was twice as fast as the muskets could fire. Also, the soldiers with carbines could stay hidden from the enemy while reloading their guns. Although the rebels outnumbered them, Union soldiers did exactly what General Buford wanted. They slowed down the Confederate advance. As the rebels brought more troops forward, Buford's men had to retreat half a mile to another ridge. The rebels surged forward, thinking they had the enemy on the run. Then, at the next ridge, the rebels were caught off guard. 2 more Union cavalry brigades were waiting. 6 canyons blocked the road. The increased firepower drove the rebels back, but not for long. Within an hour, they were on the attack with several thousand more men. Okay, so this must be the musket, because they had to stand and refill it. And this right here is the Sharp's carbine. So you can tell it's a little bit shorter, but, they still kind of look pretty big. About 10:30 Union General John Reynolds arrived with some aides at Gettysburg. They galloped to the Lutheran Seminary building, where Reynolds found Buford. "What's the matter, John?" Reynolds asked. "There's the devil to pay," Buford answered. He quickly filled Reynolds in. His troops had succeeded in slowing down the enemy infantry, but they couldn't hold much longer. So Reynolds sent a messenger to his army a few miles away. "Get to Gettysburg quickly. There is no time to waste." Reynolds sent another message to General George G. Meade's headquarters in Taneytown, Maryland. An army of 80,000 was there. Meade was general-in-chief of the entire Union army. Meade was told about the large rebel forces at Gettysburg. However, Reynolds refused to give up, the messenger reported. Reynolds would resist the rebels inch by inch. This was the place to fight Lee. Reynolds needed Meade's large army to do that. Let's show you the pictures before I move on. Reynolds' first 2 brigades came onto the battlefield at about 10:30 in the morning. One of the brigades was the famous Iron Brigade from Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan. The Iron Brigade was distinctive black stovepipe hats. The rebels had fought them before and knew that the Iron Brigade was tough, brave, and never backed down. Reynolds was directing the action. "Forward, men, forward, for God's sake." Suddenly he fell from his horse to the ground. He had been shot in the head. "I never saw a man die more quickly," a soldier reported. That's scary. This was a huge loss for the Union. Reynolds was one of their most experienced officers. He was also very good at planning battles. Now he was gone. Reynolds' men laid his body under a nearby tree. Today, visitors to Gettysburg can see a monument marking the spot where the general fell. This must be when he was on his horse and got shot in the head. Reynolds was the highest-ranking officer on either side to die at Gettysburg. His replacement was General Abner Doubleday. In 1861, Doubleday had been stationed at Fort Sumter, where the Civil War started. Later, after the war was over, Doubleday would be credited with inventing the game of baseball, but this is not so. Doubleday's job was to hold the rebels back as long as he could. It would take several hours for Meade and his men to reach Gettysburg. The Iron Brigade lived up to its reputation. They swept throughout the woods and pushed the rebels back up the Chambersburg Pike. They also captured Confederate General James Archer. Doubleday and Archer knew each other from before the war. "Good morning, Archer," Doubleday said as the Southern general was brought before him. "How are you? I'm glad to see you." Archer refused to shake hands with his old friend. "Well, I'm not glad to see you," he replied. Meanwhile, the battle was changing minute by minute. Doubleday saw that the right side of the Union line had begun to retreat toward town. The rebels under the command of General Joseph Davis was moving so quickly that they ran right past Doubleday and his men. Doubleday immediately sent a regiment after them. The Confederates, now under attack from both sides, looked for a way to escape. They found an unused railroad cut, or trench. It seemed to offer good cover. The rebels scrambled into it, only to discover that the steep sides were too deep to shoot over. Union troops blocked both ends of the trench and set up a deadly crossfire. Dozens of rebels were killed in only a few minutes. Davis's men had no choice but to surrender. The Union would not be able to enjoy this small victory for very long. More and more Confederate troops were joining the battle from the north and west. In fact, almost the whole rebel army was about to descend on Gettysburg. Doubleday ordered his men to retreat through town and up onto Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge. This was about a mile away. The fighting continued right on the streets of Gettysburg, with many Union soldiers killed or captured. At the gatehouse of the town cemetery, a sign said all persons using firearms in these grounds will be prosecuted with the utmost rigor of the law. This sign had been put up long before the war came to Gettysburg. The words were ignored by soldiers on both sides for the next 3 days. About half the Union troops made their way safely to the two hills. Their first task was to dig in and build temporary walls and trenches. The rebels were close behind. If the Southerners had organized a charge up the hills right then, they could have overpowered Doubleday's men and captured the important high ground. But a Confederate officer held his men back. This was a terrible mistake. Who knows? Had the right decision been made, the outcome of the Battle of Gettysburg might have been very different. So the rebel soldiers surrendered in trench. So this is where they were in that trench, and both sides were all around. July 1st ended with the Union troops on Culp's Hill and strung along Cemetery Ridge from Cemetery Hill to Little Round Top. They had suffered heavy losses. Almost 10,000 men had been killed or captured, but they kept the high ground. The Southern forces were camped in Gettysburg and surrounding fields. The rebels had lost about 8,000 men. They had also lost the high ground. It had been a very bloody day, but worse was to come. Matthew Brady. The Civil War was the first major war with a photographic record of the death and destruction caused by battles. In earlier wars, artists sketched scenes that later ran in newspapers and magazines. Matthew Brady was the most well-known of the Civil War's photographers. Brady and his men did not photograph combat. Photo equipment was too large and heavy to carry into battles. They brought their own darkroom along in the back of a horse-drawn wagon to develop pictures. Sometimes photographers would move bodies to create better pictures. A famous photograph from Gettysburg was staged to show a dead Confederate soldier with his musket propped against a boulder. All right, that is the end of chapter 3 for today, and I will be back to read chapter 4. I hope you guys all have a great day.